Yeah.
But you were, like you said, it's a life sentence.
For sure.
So at some point, you had a crossroads where you kind of almost stepped up to being like a global kind of kingpin, which is what's interesting. You're a laid back guy. I mean, obviously you like money, so I'm not gonna act like you don't like money, but you're certainly not someone infected with the idea of, I want to be a gangster and I want all the money. But yet when you're in that situation where you're really interacting with people that will spend $1 million every day and like you're really in it, the momentum just takes on a life of its own. And you knew someone in Nicaragua, which something pretty extreme almost happened. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so definitely I was addicted to money. And for myself, I didn't know in that moment that I was addicted to money, right? But I was always like crunching numbers, and at the end of the day, like how much profit can someone juice? And so that was a very big thing for me. It's like margins and numbers. And somebody I had grown up with was spending a lot of time in Nicaragua, and he knew a little bit about blow, but I forget kind of why I brought it up to him, because normally I wouldn't bring it up to like regular customers and stuff that I was doing that. Maybe because he was there, and in the moment I said to him like, hey, I'm moving so many of these, it's a total trip. Like, my gosh, these guys are they want more, and I'm hitting them and flowing. And then he says, wow. So he goes, he goes, those down here are only like 3,000 to 5,000. And when he said that, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. There's no way. And he goes, on everything, bro. And I was like, can you get like a lot of them? And the scenario, and he's like, I'll find out.
So why were you thinking about it? Were you conscious, or like why, like you were
It's just a huge difference between paying like 23,000.
Right, but you didn't want to be doing it, or
yeah,
the money was it was lighting up your mind.
It was the money. So when I'm paying 23,000 and then not making much, and someone says they can get them for 3,000 or 5, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, can you imagine making like 20,000 times 100? You know what I mean? So it's pretty intense. So with that being said, when he said that to me, I was like, well, dude, I want to come down there. And he was like, yeah, you can stay at my place. You can do this and that. And so, I booked a flight eventually. But before I had gone down there, I spoke to these the Sinaloa peeps that I had. And there was a connection to the Guzman family. Like my connection, I want to say like cousin or sister was like married into the Guzmans, and that's why it was like super whatever we wanted sort of thing, it was really easy for us. And so I started to explain to him, hey, did you know that there's this much in places like that? And I kind of like sparked his attention as well. So I'm kind of like confused if I booked a trip or I was pre-planning how to like do the transportation and how to get it before I actually physically flew down there. But I did speak to my own personal pilot who I had flying cannabis all across America. And I was asking him, can you get, the airplane that I paid for all the way to Nicaragua? And he said no, because of the gasoline refueling that you can't, And so I was trying to figure out a solution as to how do I.
So tell us about what was Nicaragua, when you get to Nicaragua, like what was it like?
Yeah, so I arrived, I think it was like early evening, and it felt a very like third world and sketchy, almost like a dirty prison or something when you landed, and you go through.
You landed what, Managua?
Yep, I believe so.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
And so
And it's a war-damaged kind of country. Like,
Oh, for sure.
you could still see the remnants of. So the same,
Even though they don't have an army.
not anymore, but the same political process that was the whole Contra cocaine thing, that was also going on in Nicaragua. So all that U.S. support of right-wing governments and there being left-wing and communist rebels, like still the remnants of, or even still the active. Did you see, there was no military in Nicaragua? Were there police?
No, it's so funny that police will hitchhike on the side of the road. They literally don't even have transportation at times. There's a lot of hitchhiking that goes on in Nicaragua. And you can literally pick up a police officer and give him a ride somewhere. At one point, my friend was like, we were joking and he wanted to like pick somebody up or something. And I was like, no way are we going to pick someone up. Like, I just flew in from the States. I'm not feeling that, bro. You know what I mean?
How long had he been down there?
I'm not entirely positive, but I would say a while. He had already built up a home and a business. And
what was his business down?
I don't want to put him on blast sort of thing, because some of us will recognize who the person is, but he was like in another like illicit form of business, Yeah.
And he liked it. He was pretty set up. He liked it down there, or just it was the money, or?
No, it was like as far as like surfing and making money, and then almost just getting out of America and living a little bit of a different, laid back, interesting life, I guess, right? And
what was the safety environment down there?
So it was one of the first things is like once I landed and we were in his car, I remember it being dark outside, and he would pull up to a red light and then just take off. And I was like, hey, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, so you got to sit tight at a red light. And he was like, no, people could approach the car. And I don't know if it was like a carjack or a robbery, but we don't sit around at red lights in like areas like this.
Was he armed?
Yeah.
Was everybody armed in Nicaragua?
For the most part, and that was another thing that tripped me out. It's like jumping into his car, and there's like guns visibly in the car, and like normally in the States we'll conceal those or not have them, but his was like out, sort of like a visible. And it wasn't that evening I didn't notice, but like later on in the trip, when we would go to a residential area, they have gated entry. And a lot of times those gated guards, when you go to places out here, we'll buzz you in, or who you here to see. These dudes literally had guns this big. You know what I mean? They're like machine guns, sort of rifles or whatever, at the gate, at just a standard residential subdivision.
What did it seem like was like? So the native Nicaraguans are probably generally poor. Like, who was living in the?
For sure.
Who was living in the gated areas?
There are business owners, like they have shopping malls and various things like that, and it really is so inexpensive that the wealthy have, they have personal chefs. They have, the people that look after the kids. They have the caretakers. You can really hire so much of a staff for, it's been so long, but I want to say like something insane amount of money, like $20 a day or something. You could have a chef, like the income ratio was so different.
And what was did you like it? How long did you stay down there?
I was there for, I think, a little over 2 weeks.
Oh, for a little bit. So would that have been a place you would have lived, or?
Probably not. For one, I didn't run into many people that spoke English, which was fine because my friend, he interpreted the whole trip. But, it definitely was interesting, and we did some other stuff. We went down to the beach and various things, but kind of back to my story. Before I ended up going down there, I spoke to like my Sinaloa people, and I thought I arranged for airplanes to come out of Mexico and either fly directly into Nicaragua or I don't know if they were going to stop off at like Belize, but I was trying to coordinate the transportation so that I could make this happen, and do it all myself. So I went down to Nicaragua and I was communicating with those people. And once I had met with the supplier in Nicaragua, we had chatted about, like, could they possibly get them into the States? And of course, at the moment, no. That if that was the case, they would already be there, sort of thing, and I could purchase them. And clearly, they would be worth way, way more if they were already landed. So I did try to ask if they could help expedite. And in the moment, it was like, no. All we can do is sell you bricks that are 3,000 to 5,000, and they're right here. And whatever you want, like however many, we got you. So then I was like, okay, well, I need to figure that out. And so I kept pushing for my planes, the people that not necessarily a plane that I owned, but for people that had connections in other airplanes to fly in. And so I worked out with the Nicaraguan people. We had like areas of like a jungle, or how you see now.
Were they organized crime, or were they just, or what were they like?
I don't know that I spent enough time to declare like organized, but they definitely had like a black market scene that they were involved in.
But were they primarily drug dealers, or they just had access
No,
to
they
it?
were entrepreneurs, and they ran other things like security and other businesses.
Oh, and they just had access to it.
Exactly. In the moment, because so it ended up not working out. But when I was there, my side never showed up with the airplane. So what I had intended on doing was a dry run, and we were going to have an airplane come in and then just pretend as if we're doing this, and load like duffel bags. Maybe we just put clothing or something on the duffel bag, so it's a legit run, and then fly it back into Mexico, and then of course just run it through the States.
So what did the Sinaloa people say when you were calling about the plane?
I guess, I was like doing so much and putting so much together, it sounded like so far-fetched. Like when someone proposes something, you try to wrap your head around it. They were into it, but when I went to Nicaragua and was like, kept calling, I'm here, let's go, I got this, come through, we'll do the dry run. And I guess it was like lost in translation, and they never followed through on their part. So then what I continued to do was I tried to figure out, I had other containers that had come to the States with like, furniture and other sorts of things on there. And I was thinking of ways to best camouflage a load. And I just never went for it, because everything had to be paid for in Nicaragua. And I didn't really want to buy a bunch and then possibly lose the money. And then I didn't really want to do like a small load. So I just couldn't get it to like make sense. And then I actually never just said I'm going to go for it. And,
Because, I mean, during that time, were there no thoughts of like, wait a second, what am I doing?
The only thought was, if I did do the container, that's not a solid route. You know what I mean? Like that has to go through customs, and it's not as like, when it's airplane, we're superseding all of those things and going directly for our own people, right? And so whenever it came to transportation and things, we always tried to do things that were very like knowledgeable and ingenious, and not just like rush it.
So, but did you ever thought of like, I'm getting kind of beyond my initial mission statement. I'm getting kind of out of control. That what am I doing? I'm in Nicaragua.
Yeah, like even some of my buddies here in the States, when I mentioned that I was going, they were like, dude, you're crazy. Like, what is with you? Like, you make enough money. Like, why are you going? Is it because like you don't have kids and you just don't care? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have the blinders. And one of my friends said, do you know that there's like, you know, the alphabet of out here, you know, the people that investigate, that they travel in all these different areas. And if you're just some white guy at a restaurant or a bar, they absolutely will approach you and like, you know, you don't even know. Like even yesterday, like an example of just like PTSD or something. Yesterday I was out somewhere and some really like alphabet looking investigator guys rolled up to me and were commenting on my clothes, and then next thing you know they're like, what's your name? And like just asking way too many questions, you know, and that happens in public, you know.
Oh, just socially, like,
yeah,
like they're the feds and you just look
correct,
like you fit some demographic of a trafficker, so now they just strike up conversation with you.
For sure. And
do you
I don't know
think
if it's
that
an
because of your
Interpol
convictions, like that you get checked on sometimes?
I think so. I've mentioned that to other people, and they're like, you know, that you're not that big, or no one cares, or it was that old, and I go, I don't know. I'm willing to bet that there's a database that
there is, of course,
where they check back every once in a while.
Yeah, because if you rose to that, and even though you didn't get charged with the cocaine stuff and all that, I mean, they knew, and to some extent, someone,
right.
You know what I mean? Or like the amounts of money, and they knew who you were dealing with. Like they probably figure like there's no telling what you were doing.
The way I look at that with the feds is, you know, your local neighborhood thug and bully. Everyone maybe has one from town to town, and the guy that's getting arrested all the time, he's jacking people. And eventually those people can just do themselves a solid and like move out of their neighborhood because all the cops know who Matt is. Yeah. Everyone's Matt. He's fucking robs this. Matt's always bust. And I truly feel that the feds do the same thing. And I kind of even can assume that they do, because there was a time when I was incarcerated and I got called in to meet with my case manager, and he gave me a printout. And at the moment, I don't even know what the printout like was for or why he gave it to me. But I took it back to my cell, and it was a complete thing all about me. Like it was like my age, my race, what kind of food I ate, what kind of religion I did, can I buy my own groceries, do I work out? And it had all these various things on my behavior. And I thought this was so weird. And on there, it talked about my drug use, and it said that I used, I forget which one it was, like hallucinogenics or ecstasy or blow every day, like as a street person or something. And that pissed me off. And I fucking walked back to the dude's office and I said, hey, like, what is this? Why does it say that I use drugs like that? And because I might socially party or something, but
because you can't run a business.
No, and even there was like probably a good over 5 years that I spent 100% sober, just because I was like solid banging like all kinds of moves out, you know? And then he comes and goes, well, you know, don't worry about it. That we're getting like someone's in a lawsuit over this form anyways, and we might not be able to make it anymore, and they might stop those. But he was like, he wouldn't change it, you know? And that kind of just tripped me off. It reminded me of when I was a gambler in Las Vegas, and I was what they call a comped player, and I had my own, I don't know if it's like a pit boss. I want to use the word for him. But anyways, he would always give me free everything, you know, a hotel, suites, cars.
Really guest services.
Yeah.
And they know how much you're gambling and they're...
Yeah, so a couple times I would start to arrive and I no longer had to check into the hotel. I could just go straight to my suite. So they instantly knew everything I like. Oh, I like purple grape Gatorade. I like this type of cigar. And they had it all there before I got there. And it just made me think that, you know, I'm sure to some degree.
They build a behavioral profile.
Yeah. So anyways, but I know we got a little sidetracked.
So you're in Nicaragua. but you're actually proactively some point trying to figure out how to put it together. But once the Sinaloa people weren't going to help you, you gave up.
Pretty much, yeah.
Though you could have figured out something, but
I could have, essentially what it came down to is if I just rolled the dice, you know, and just went for it. I absolutely could have put it into a regular freight container, and I was really close to putting it into roof tiles, the ceramic Spanish tile ones, because at the time I was starting to build a house, and I wanted to be like a developer, contractor, and I thought, fuck, maybe if I just order a bunch of these tiles and start selling the roof tile and along with it. And so I was really close to doing that, you know?
so you come back from Nicaragua, and how much longer till you start going under investigation and get arrested?
Yeah, no, I think what it was is somebody out of, I think it was Detroit, I want to say, ended up getting in trouble for cannabis. And because that happened, it just led me to kind of cool off with everything. And then I always kind of felt like the cannabis end of it was so big for me. Like, let's say you have a notepad of paper here. Well, I could feel that, you know, top to bottom, multiple sides, you know, 1 through 100 customers. But with the blow, I only had like 3 or 4, you know? And so I felt like with the cannabis, I couldn't stop, even if I tried to delegate it to other crew members and tried to like get more hands off and more out of sight.
So, well, when you come back from Nicaragua, did you stop with at what point did you stop with the coke?
Yeah, somebody had got in trouble.
Oh, and that you're saying in Detroit.
Yeah.
With the cannabis, so that made you stop the coke.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And were the people in Canada like upset, or did they disappointed? I mean, were they trying to?
I think they were a little bit, but they were cool with it, you know, at the same time, I guess. And it wasn't, I think it was, we're always trying to look out for our safety in regards to getting rolled up. So even when we were doing all these, we call them, when we're doing crossing the border with narcotics back and forth, we would call it jump, you know, or the hop. And so oftentimes whatever we're doing, like the hop, and it's going maybe into Canada or it's coming from Canada into America, we would always make sure our transportation is like super stealth. No one's going to find it. It wouldn't be worth it for us to, you know, do sloppy stuff, right?
How was, and so we hear a lot about smuggling between the U.S.-Mexican border, of course, but how did it work at the Canadian border? Is it less guarded?
Variations. So for instance, getting the blow across, oftentimes we'd use an airplane that landed on water. Are those called pontoon? Yeah. So it was like a pontoon boat, and then maybe jet skis would hit the boat, and then like they would throw bags on the jet skis, and then jet ski into land. That was like one way.
And this would be up north of Seattle?
In Canada at this point, yeah.
But like
Seattle area, so
Vancouver,
yeah,
okay.
Vancouver,
because Vancouver and Seattle, can't you like? Aren't they almost like twin cities? Like you drive
like
a bridge
there's
from
people that
Seattle?
are in Canada that can go grocery shopping in Washington.
Okay.
And I was hanging in Canada, and one of my friend's wives was like, "Oh, I'm going into the States to get food and grocery," and I was like, "What?" She just drives over, and it's something like that. So. And then some of the other ones are like through the water is good. Other times people use like 4-wheelers, like ATVs, to like backpack through the wilderness and through trails. You can go to like national parks and forestry in order to like get product through. And then as far as cannabis coming through, there were times where I believe those police up there are called Mounties. Yeah. And they would have paid Mountie, and he would flag them through knowing that this RV is coming through. And that one went for a long time, right? And then there was another one where it went for quite some time, sometimes multiple times a week, and it was a cattle trailer. And when you go through customs, they have what's called a gamma ray, and it's the same way we x-ray our bones, but it's a gamma ray to x-ray vehicles, and it's a gigantic x-ray machine. But by their law, you're not allowed to gamma ray livestock, which I'm not entirely sure the reasoning behind that, but the Canadians started using a cattle trailer, and inside the cattle trailer was a false bottom, like where the cows would sit. There would be tons of manure and, all that, right? And then maybe, 1 foot of space below was all this, cannabis. So sometimes when I would even get the cannabis to Los Angeles, it would have manure on the plastic from being, exported out. But that one would go a lot, and eventually, I think it's public record, it got clipped with like 1,700 pounds of cannabis on it. And the reason why it got caught is somebody clearly tipped him off, because the gamma ray was working all the time. And for them to pull a cattle, and then actually they have to remove the cattle from the trailer. They cannot be inside the trailer.
They knew.
Yeah. So I remember when that one got shut down, it took probably like almost a good 3 or 4 weeks to come up with another like mastermind way.
For when normal or people not involved in this type of stuff, it just seems so wild doing this stuff, and then you only see the news reports of people getting caught, so subconsciously I guess it seems like, well, if you do this kind of stuff you're going to get caught, so you shouldn't do it. But realistically, for those that are major smugglers of whatever in and out of different countries, I mean, if you make it up to that point and you're tied in with the system and all that, like, probably there's a lot of smuggling things that go on forever.
So I have 2 more, right? So another one was the forest industry is huge in Canada, and they chop down a lot of trees. So they sell those trees sometimes like stripped, or sometimes just a full tree for like log cabins. And there's a lot of wood that goes out of Canada and comes into America. So one of the other ones was they would take a huge tree and hollow it out and like glue it all back together to where it looked like a real fucking solid through and through tree. And then when those would make it into Los Angeles, they would bust down massive, like things of trees. And I remember a friend of mine even having just a ton of that stuff at a warehouse. Like he started using it to like build fences and other like weird stuff, right? So one of them was hollowing out trees that look like they're going to log cabins. And then I remember it was just a handful of time, and I asked, like, where are these coming from? And apparently they were coming from Asians, and they looked like as if it was like boxed in frozen food. Complete like logo, lettering, 100% looked like a product you buy out of the grocery store, and it was shrimp. So it had like shrimps on it, it was like white paper, it had all these logos, and when you open it, it had like 1 pound vacuum sealed, pretty thin, and it looked like almost like a box of pizza. And I was getting a grip of those too at one point. I kept saying, oh, who's got the shrimp? It was pretty funny. So we'd used sometimes helicopters for a quick jump, like just up in the air above below like radar jumping. And then as far as the border goes too, there's tons of cameras, so they could suspect jump. Yeah, there are cameras for jumps like that. So we use helicopters, we use jet skis, ATVs, hollowed out logs, getting them through, and like big rigs.
Any close calls?
Yeah, I don't know that there was close calls, but Well, there was actually a one dude that I started working with, and it was like a new person. And I kept asking him, how's your hop? You know, because our hop was down, or we call it TP, the transportation hop. And he's like, I got my own hop and we're going to do it. And so I don't know if I wasn't clear on how he was going to do it. But at the end of the day, like, he goes, hey, we lost. And it was some load that we had already prepaid. And he was doing it over water. And sometimes they put him in like little fishing boats, get him over to the States, and then people pick him up like that. And he was like, dude, we threw him overboard, and it didn't even work because the duffel bags floated. They didn't even sink, you know? Sometimes, speaking of that too, sometimes they'll do things where they'll leave, like what we have now is an air tag. You can leave a tracker. Yeah. And then I did know one crew that was doing stuff where they could sink a load in the water, and then they could hit like, I think it's like a CO2, and it would bring that to the surface.
Oh, so they would drop it underwater.
Yeah.
With some type of air tag or something that could communicate, and it had a CO2 canister, and then you get in the area, you hit the button, and it rises.
Exactly.
It's like a James Bond.
Yeah, yeah. So when I say like they were not sloppy at all, like a lot of times we hadn't even, one time where the transportation had got busted, and I kept saying, let's go. And he said, no, we have to like make sure our next move is good. We can't obviously continue to lose. And, you know, so it was always, we would refer to it like, I told them the club about the dude that lost on the fishing. And they refer to that dude as like cowboy, you know, like we don't do like, oh, let's just go for it, you know, style. They make sure like no one's going to see this, you know.
So the government's estimates and assessments of how much of any particular, whatever, any drug, they don't really, who knows who's getting away with what? We just know what gets caught.
Absolutely. Like at some point too, I was trying to figure out.
And it sounds like the United States is like a black hole, a limitless. If you have whatever at the right price, this country's so large. There's so many different big cities. You can sell anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Think of the underground tunnels that just flow hard. You know what I mean? And every day those dudes are rocking and rolling. So even when I was contemplating how to make this move out of Nicaragua, I was also thinking, how can I get it straight from Nicaragua right into Canada? And that was another thing. And I know someone else that did try a container, and I don't know if it was coming from Europe into Canada, and they sometimes would say they cut the locks and they look at them. But you know, if I had fulfilled that undertaking, it would have been a legendary, like for sure, a movie like the movie Blow or American Gangster with Frank Lucas. Like, it's almost the same sort of thing, and it's a way like I don't know if those movies I think were even out, and I don't know if they kind of like they might have been. I recall seeing American Gangster before I got locked up, and even one of my friends that saw it, I don't know if it was Blow, but he like, he's a big dude, and he was like, as far as like slanging goes, he's a big guy, right? So he told me he cried, and I was like, "Will you cry?" And he was like, "Fucking shit's sad, bro." Like, you know, I don't know if it was like his friend in the movie, his friend turned on him or what, you know. And we're always just kind of thinking of that.